Hey everyone, if you have a lot of Bitcoin, you should absolutely have the vast majority or even all of it stored on Bitkey rather than on an exchange like Coinbase or Robinhood or anything else, any centralized exchange. But you might wonder, well, why do I recommend you keep your Bitkey if you have a lot of Bitcoin? And by a lot, I mean, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, etc. A lot, whatever a very lot is to you. Why do I recommend you keep the Bitkey device in a safe deposit box at a bank? First of all, what is a safe deposit box? Every single bank, you probably never noticed when you bank, but every single bank has safe deposit boxes, which are little lock boxes that are in the side or back of the bank, and you can rent those. Typically, they cost about $30 per year for the smallest size. So that comes out to $2.50, $2.50 a month. So just $30 a year. So super, super cheap. And that gives you a tiny little place, the size of a shoebox maybe, to store your valuables. And of course, Bitkey is tiny, so it easily fits. So why do I recommend you keep Bitkey there? Well, for two reasons. One, it creates time separation between when you decide you want to move your Bitcoin or send it someplace and when you actually do. In that time separation, it gives you more time to think about whether what you're doing is a scam. So, for example, if somebody calls you or reaches out on WhatsApp and says, hey, I have a Bitcoin trading service, if you send me your Bitcoin, I'll send you 10 times as much of it back in 30 days or some crazy offer, then the time it takes you to go to the bank to grab your Bitkey, to hold it to the back of your phone to send the scammer or the hacker your Bitcoin, there's some time for you to think about that. It's not something you're just going to suddenly do live on the phone with somebody, a scammer that claims they're with technical support for somewhere and they need to validate your identity and you need to send them all of your Bitcoin to validate your identity, or that they're with tech support of Google or Coinbase. I've never heard anybody claim to be tech support from Bitkey, but eventually scammers and hackers will start claiming to be tech support from Bitkey. They'll get around to every Bitcoin service eventually. And anyway, regardless, or they call you up and they claim that you owe back taxes and a warrant is out for your arrest and the police are coming to get you. And if you send all of the Bitcoin to satisfy your tax bill right now, that they will call off the law enforcement that is coming to hunt you down. Anyway, scammers and hackers basically are trying absolutely everything to separate you from your Bitcoin. Well, if your Bitkey is in a safe deposit box at a bank, then it takes you some number of minutes or hours to get it. And in that time, you can think, wait a second, what is the probability that the IRS is really after me with armed, IRS agents? And is this really an IRS agent I'm talking to on the phone who's claiming I need to send them all of my Bitcoin, otherwise they will arrest me, et cetera, et cetera. So it creates some time. But what it also does is it keeps you from being in a position that if you get held up at gunpoint, which is never going to happen, but we plan for everything, even the extremely unlikely scenarios, you get held up at gunpoint, and it creates an opportunity for you to tell your assailant when they say, transfer me everything of wealth that you have, give me all your jewelry, give me your wallet, and send me any cryptocurrency you have on your phone. It gives you the opportunity to comply with that request because you don't have a lot of crypto on your phone, because you cannot send them your Bitkey Bitcoin specifically. You cannot send it without going to the bank. Well, you'll notice that there's, all sorts of news reports of people getting held up at gunpoint and robbed and all this sort of stuff. In 0% of those stories does the gunman escort the person to the bank to withdraw money at the bank. Now, why is that? It's because bad guys do not want to go to the bank. Because banks have armed guards. Banks have little buttons under the counter where when you push them, it locks everything down, closes the door, and calls the police. And banks have security cameras everywhere. And the parking lot of the bank is monitored by security cameras. Basically, banks are the last place that someone wants to go who is trying to extract value from you. If they wanted to rob a bank, they'd go rob it, which is unlikely and uncommon. But if they want to rob you, they want to do that in the privacy of a gas station parking lot or a home invasion or something, which again, is not going to happen to you, but we should plan for everything. So in those situations, virtually never does an assailant in the real world escort the person to the bank because they don't want to go to the bank. So if you have your Bitkey device in a bank safe deposit box and you are assailed in real life by someone who tells you to give them all of your valuables, again, jewelry, wallet, and transfer any crypto you have on your phone, then you can do that and say, well, I can't really send you that much because all I got's a small working balance for my Coinbase debit card in Coinbase, and the rest of it's in Bitkey, and I can't transfer it from my phone without my Bitkey device. And so at that point, you give the attacker everything you have access to, and there's nothing else you even could give them. So that is way better than walking around with, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or whatever of any kind of cryptocurrency on your phone. Because if you're walking around with it on your phone, then you are in a position where somebody could force you to transfer it to someone else. So if your Bitkey device is in a safe deposit box at a bank, then it mitigates that risk. So that means a safe deposit box for your Bitkey device requires you to go to the bank to transfer large amounts. Now, you can set up a limit in Bitkey to transfer small amounts. So let's say you have, pick a number, $100,000 of Bitcoin. I'm going to pick a number that would be a lot for most people. Let's say one Bitcoin. Let's say you have one Bitcoin, that's $105,000 of Bitcoin. You can set up Bitkey where you can transfer $1,000 or $2,000 or $5,000 per day, which means in a situation where things go bad, you could transfer a bad guy the amount of Bitcoin at the daily limit. But again, if that's only set up to 1% or 2% or 5% of your Bitcoin, that means you can't transfer the rest of that Bitcoin unless you did it over a very extended period of time, like $2,000 a day for 50 days, if your limit is set at 2,000 and you've got $100,000 of Bitcoin. Again, all of that just builds in a lot of safeguards to make sure that, if you're held up at gunpoint, there's really nothing that can happen. So I will not go, for security reasons, I will not go in to any of the details of my own security setup other than to say, I do not walk around with the ability to transfer any meaningful amount of Bitcoin to anyone at all. So if anyone wants any meaningful amount of Bitcoin, it's not available on my phone. My security setup involves a lot of complexity, even for me. It involves, dogs. It involves armed guards. It involves time delays. It involves geographic separation. It involves a bunch of other things I'm not going to go into the details on. But the short take is, it is a very complicated, multifaceted process that to move large amounts of Bitcoin for me takes a long time and is exactly the opposite of the process that anyone would ever want to go through if they were trying to get my Bitcoin. So I've spent a lot of time thinking about, okay, if somebody wanted my Bitcoin, how would they go about trying to get it? And then I've done everything in my power to make it very hard for them not only to get my Bitcoin, but very hard for me to get my Bitcoin in a situation where I am under duress. And that is a great deterrent, is to just make it as hard as possible to do that. Now, I do not recommend my setup to people because it's way too complicated and involved, for the average person. But if you've got any amount of Bitcoin that you consider to be a really large amount of Bitcoin, then the simple thing, the easy step is get a Bitkey and move most or all of your Bitcoin to the Bitkey. If you have a lot of Bitcoin such that even having the Bitkey in your house makes you nervous, perhaps you live in a high crime area where home invasions are common. I do not live in a high crime area. Home invasions are virtually non-existent where I live. I can't say it would never happen, but it would be extremely unlikely. And the nature of, security cameras, in my case, my house has a whole security apparatus. And I have an enhanced concealed carry weapons permit, so I can carry a gun 24/7 and all that good stuff, no matter where I am. Anyway, but again, the average person, I'm not saying the average person needs to do any of that. The average person should take common sense precautions, which involves just putting your Bitcoin on Bitkey, not just having it on your phone. And second, putting your Bitkey device somewhere more secure than your house. Again, if you live in a high crime area, or even if you don't, it's great in a situation, if there's a home invasion or something like that, to be able to honestly tell whoever it is that, yes, I will give you everything of value that I possibly can, And I'm sorry, the rest I just can't give you. So for example, if you have, the reason I like a safe deposit box is because for essentially for $30 per year, you are renting from the bank armed guards and cameras and security systems and all of the things that you may not want to afford yourself. Like in my case, I would never keep a Bitkey device at my house or anywhere else where it was easily accessible by me. But again, if you have a small amount of Bitcoin, it may make sense to keep it at your house. If you have a moderate to a large amount of Bitcoin, I would absolutely keep your Bitkey device at a bank. First of all, that means it is not available to you except during business hours. Again, other than whatever the amount is that you've set up that you can transfer without your Bitkey device, which again, maybe that's 1%, maybe 2%, maybe 5% of your Bitcoin, but it's some small number. Or if you have a lot of Bitcoin, it's a very small number. So small enough that, again, it's immaterial as to whether it's part of your Bitcoin stack. But essentially, as long as your Bitkey's at a bank, then that means over the nights and weekends, which are some of the times that crime happens, banking hours are only, 20 or 25% of all the hours in the week. That means 75% of the time, which is nights and most of the weekends and all of that, the bank is closed, which means your Bitcoin and your Bitkey is unaccessible to you, but it also means it's unaccessible to someone who wants to get it. And again, in a situation where your bank closes or burns down or something like that, you can always transfer the Bitcoin off little by little based on the daily limit, or go through the recovery process that Bitkey provides. But that recovery process has at least a 7-day waiting period, and they're planning to introduce a configurable option so you can set it for even longer, to 14 days or 30 days or even 6 months or something like that, where if the bank burns down, your Bitkey's in it, you can replace it with another Bitkey. It just requires a waiting period, and you can set that waiting period long enough that it will massively deter anyone that might be out for no good. So anyway, to recap here, the best way to keep your Bitcoin out of the hands of hackers and scammers is to move it onto Bitkey. The best way to keep it out of the hands of not only hackers and scammers, but also physical assailants in the real world is to keep your Bitkey somewhere other than where you usually are. And the best place to do that is in a safe deposit box at a bank. Because, like I say, at a bank, you are effectively renting for $30 per year the security of a bank. That means the cameras, the buttons that call the police, the buttons that lock the doors, the camera systems that cover the parking lot, and the bank itself, like all of that security, you're effectively renting from the bank for $30 per year, which is super cheap, so that whenever you want to move large amounts or medium amounts of Bitcoin, you've got to go to the bank, get your Bitkey device out of your safe deposit box, hold it to the back of your phone, and then you can move Bitcoin, which again is not something that your average attacker wants to do. Now, in my case, again, I've built in significant geographic separation, so it's not even that simple. It's even more complex than that. But for the average person, I think for the average person, your local bank, wherever you bank, if you bank at a local bank, and you don't even have to be a customer there, you can just, go get a bank. I think pretty much anybody can get a safe deposit box at a bank. The way a safe deposit box works is you walk in, you go to the teller, you tell them you want to access a safe deposit box. You have to have your safe deposit box key with you. They have a safe deposit box key as well, so safe deposit boxes require 2 keys. You have to show your ID to make sure it's you. You have to sign so they can check your signature against the signature on file, and then they give you access to the safe deposit box. So once you're familiar with the routine, it's not a complicated process. It's easy. And again, the Bitcoin you store on Bitkey should be Bitcoin that you don't plan to use, for the next 2 or 3 years. So it should require very infrequent or almost non-existent trips to the bank. You still want to go to the bank every 6 or 12 months, or maybe every, at least every 12 months or 18 months, just to eyeball your Bitkey, make sure it's still there, make sure that your safe deposit box is paid up and that you haven't somehow forfeited it because you didn't pay the $30 per year or something like that. So it's still worth checking in on it every 6 or 12 months, just to eyeball it, touch it to the back of your phone to sync it up, make sure that everything is still good. It's still worth doing that just to sort of do a health check on it. And you could just do that in the interface. Go to the settings, and then you can update it by touching it to the back of your phone without actually moving any Bitcoin. And that'll tell you that it's working, it's synced up, and you're in good shape. So again, for most people, once you get more than maybe $5,000 or $10,000 of Bitcoin, it makes sense to put some or all of it on Bitkey. And once you get more than, I don't know, pick a number, more than, $20,000, $25,000, I don't know, whatever that number is for you, it makes sense to keep your Bitkey someplace more secure than at your house or wherever you are. Obviously, you should not keep it in your car because you don't want it with you. I mean, the whole point of Bitkey is to require something that, is not as easy as just having it. I mean, if you keep it in your pocket or your purse all the time, then if a scammer calls you, you pull it out, you touch it to the back of your phone, you send your Bitcoin, and then you realize, whoops, that was a scammer. If you, again, keep it somewhere other than where you usually are, and ideally somewhere as secure as a safe deposit box at a bank, that creates time separation because it requires time to go get it. And it also creates physical separation because you do not live your life at that same bank. And it introduces security, cameras, lockdowns, security personnel, armed guards. It introduces all of that, which is absolutely positively not what somebody who wants your Bitcoin wants to deal with. So that's what I recommend. Everybody with any meaningful amount, 5 or 10,000 or more, should have a Bitkey with most or all of their Bitcoin on it. And if they have substantially more than that, that Bitkey device should ideally be stored at a safe deposit box in a bank. Like I say, I'm not going to go into the complexities and additional security measures I take myself, but for the vast majority of people, that is a good setup that is cost efficient, accessible to everyone, and just makes sense. So stay safe out there, everyone. And last thing I'll say is don't be flashy about your Bitcoin. Some people have gotten robbed, but it tends to be, for example, influencers on the internet. They have some ridiculous amount, like $20 million of Bitcoin. This actually happened, I think, in France. Some social media influencer had $20 million of Bitcoin, and to show off to their online audience, they flashed it on their phone to their online audience, which gave some attackers the bright idea of tracking this person down because they could tell that the entire $20 million was available on that person's phone with no extra security. So they thought, hey, if they're flashing $20 million of Bitcoin into their webcam, then maybe we could go get that Bitcoin. So they tried. Now, what ended up happening is the person's boyfriend pulled a gun, shot one of the attackers, and the other attackers were captured. One of them was shot. The others were captured. But again, there is no reason this person should have had $20 million of Bitcoin on their phone. And absolutely, they should not have been flashing that to show off to their online audience of fans. That was just downright stupid, and they should not have done that. So, sorry, I think it muted in there. I don't know when it muted, but I'm getting rained on here, so the buttons are getting pushed. So anyway, this person was flashing their Bitcoin on their mobile phone, making it clear to the entire world on a live stream that they had $20 million of Bitcoin on their phone with no extra security, and some attackers decided to try to get it. So they showed up some series of days or weeks later, and one of the attackers got shot by the boyfriend of the person who was flashing the Bitcoin, and the other attackers were caught. But regardless, just don't do that. Don't flash Bitcoin. Nobody should know how much you have. Nobody should know where you keep it, how you store it. There's just no reason to know that. So the universal rule in Bitcoin is talk about Bitcoin all the time, but do not talk about your Bitcoin. Now, I talk about my Bitcoin a little bit because it's helpful for you to understand how I think about Bitcoin, but I do not talk about specific amounts of Bitcoin or things like that. And obviously, I do not walk around with any meaningful amount of Bitcoin available on my phone. I have built very complex, very secure systems that make it very hard for me or anyone else, or certainly me under duress, makes it very hard for me to get to my own Bitcoin. It is a long, arduous process on purpose to deter anyone that might desire my Bitcoin. So stay safe out there. It's not something the average person has to worry about. As long as you're not flashing your Bitcoin online and creating a massive honeypot for people to come attack, then nobody should bother you. But as with everything in life, it's worth staying safe out there. It's worth using common sense. So don't flash your Bitcoin to other people. Don't tell them how much you have. And do not walk around with a huge amount of Bitcoin sitting on your phone, just waiting for an in-person physical attack to take it away from you. So stay safe out there, use common sense, and a bank safe deposit box only costs $30 per year, not per month, per year. It's a great investment for the vast majority of people who are listening to this. And if you're listening to this and you have a lot of Bitcoin, well, then you can jump through a gazillion hoops and do insane, set up an insane gauntlet that's nearly impossible for you yourself to go through. But that is not the average person. For the average person, they should just get a safe deposit box at a bank, stick their Bitkey in it, make sure you have at least one or ideally two or more. You can have up to three, ideally two or three, but a minimum of one trusted contact set up just in case you lose your phone and the bank burns down with your Bitkey in the safe deposit box all at one time, which is not going to happen because banks have fire detection systems and all of that. So banks generally basically never burn down. So unless you're like in a California wildfire or something like that. But even then, again, there are recovery processes with Bitkey. They just all have significant time delays in them, including the inheritance process, which has a time delay of 180 days. So a full 6 months in that case. So stay safe out there, everyone. Nothing to worry about. Don't let anything I'm saying scare you because nobody's looking for your Bitcoin. But it's better to be safe than sorry. And this is just a good common sense way of securing your Bitcoin that is available to everyone. Bitkey costs $150 and a safe deposit box at a bank costs $30 per year. So I feel like those are numbers that anyone can afford who has a medium to lot of Bitcoin. And so act accordingly.